Shalom to you all. It's a beautiful day here in Texarkana, USA. We're experiencing a change in the weather. It's about to turn colder because it's our autumn. We are looking forward to speaking with you today. For some of you, it is already the Sabbath, and I wish you the most joyous and pleasant and delightful Sabbath you've ever had. For many of us, we're getting ready to enter into the Sabbath. As nightfall will set in our region, we will enjoy and welcome in the Sabbath bride here with our families and with one another, at least from a standpoint of being united in the Spirit. But in the meantime, what we have is a chance to discuss the Torah. This is where the angelic hosts begin to come and enjoy time with us whenever the angels come with the individuals, and we begin to talk about the Torah, and the angels begin to release their peace, their shalom, over us. So we are at the time of Parsha number 4, the fourth of the 54 Parshot of the Torah. It's early on in Genesis chapter 18, verse 1 through 22-24, Parsha Vayera. And he appeared, and he made himself visible and manifested, speaking of the Holy One himself, and the object of this was Abraham, and we're going to talk about the Holy One making himself manifest, making himself seem as if he were corporeal, though he is not, and there be where we can see him, recognize him sensorially in our human frailty, because he is not corporeal. He is not a body. He is a spirit, but yet he allows us to see him as he would be to us if he could appear in person. Parsha Vayera, the fourth of the Parshot, and I call this one. Get ready. It's a little bit of a subdivision or a subtopic name, but it's in what or in whom will you trust? It starts out like that. In what or in whom will you trust? And how will you respond and behave when certain things happen? What's going to happen? In what and in whom will you trust? And how will you respond and behave when? And here's the when. When lives, your own and others. When spouses and their lives and their legacies, and children and their lives and their health and their well-being, and bloodlines and its future, and dreams that you've had, and legacies that you wish to leave. What will you do? How will you respond? How will you behave? In whom will you trust when all those things, all those people that you care about most are at risk? When there is an existential crisis that could destroy them all, when their lives hang in the balance, whom will you trust? In what will you trust? How will you respond and behave when these things are at risk and in danger? This is the highest level of test, and we're going to see it take place in multiple lives, Abraham being the most famous. The big test of his life is going to come as he sees the most precious things that he has known, that he has felt in the human mortal life, begin to be challenged and threatened in this world, in this week. This is the fourth week of the Parsha of the Torah cycle, and last week we were introduced to this man, Avraham, who is so important to us, who we feel intensely, intimately connected spiritually, and whom we are intimately and instantly connected to him spiritually. He is the prototype asset in the Holy One's strategic initiative to redeem mankind as a species and to restore creation to its intended state. He is the asset, and we are connected to him. We are of his seed, spiritually, if not biologically. And we have not replaced him. We merely are living the same script that he walked in this earth. We're living the same covenant calling that he had in his life. And so we're intimately connected to him. So last week we were introduced to him. This week we are taking his life one step further. As the Holy One processes him through years and years and decades, he processes his asset and the nations along with him through the ultimate crucible of mortal life, which is mortality itself. learning, dealing with the fact that we are mortal and that we have no control. We are vulnerable at all times to the onset of death, either in ourselves or those that we love and care about most. This is the challenge that we face. Now, we have discussed in previous conversations, beloved, that the Holy One has a grand plan for the redemption of mankind as a species. Bloodline by bloodline, he intends to do it. And also he has a great plan to restore every inch and acre, every hillside, every valley, every waterway, every mountain top of creation to its intended original state of Edenic beauty, fruitfulness, and shalom. That is the grand plan, and it's operative. Now, the key elements of the grand plan as they affect us is that the Holy One will implement this grand plan of redemption and restoration. Starting with, number one, establishing a connection, opening communication with one prototypical man, the asset, that's Avram, and with his bloodline. This connection, this open line of communication is the first key to the grand plan of redemption and restoration as it has been designed and implemented on the earth by the Holy One. We're reading about it in the Torah. We're learning about it. We're walking it out at some stages. We walk through this same script that Abraham walked. The second phase, after the establishment of a connection and open communication with the asset, and I hope you realize you're the asset and so will your children be. The second thing is to make brit, to make covenant. Brit is the Hebrew word that means to inscribe, to cut, to begin to divide out, and to do so in such a way that it puts a path or a pattern before you. So the make brit, the Holy One's plan involves establishing a relationship of wonder, awe, reverence, yirat Adonai, the fear of the Holy One, and also an atmosphere, relationship of trust, emunah. Faith is called in English, I believe, but it's so much more than that. It's actually carrying and attaching ourselves to the life force as if it was more important to us than our own life. And then love, ahavat. The idea of the brit leads us into a life of love, a life of walking in love toward the Holy One, and because of his love for humanity, toward the humanity as well. And then a life not only of yirat, of trust, of love, but also of avodah, service. A life where we are here to serve the Holy One. We're here to serve our families. We're here to serve the poor. We're here to serve the widow, the orphan, the foreigner, the stranger, the Levite. We're here to serve the world. And then we see the next phase of friendship. We go from servants to friends, and that's the part of the maturation process. The Holy One's plan is not just that he has a bunch of servants, but he has a bunch of friends who carry his ways into the world. With the covenant communication, connection, with the brit being set up and all this new lifestyle being delivered, there is then the third part of the plan of redemption and restoration is haderech, the way. He opens up a way, it blazes a narrow road pathway, a pathway of transcendence, to overcome, to get past, get through, to not get bogged down in the things that bog down the world, that help us to overcome and pass through successfully an obstacle course of prototypical life challenges. He's doing this. This is part of his plan to teach us, to get us on that pathway, to teach us how to get through it, and then just show us and make a blaze a trail that others can follow through the obstacles of life, the challenges, the temptations, the tests of life. And then fourth element of the key plan is that he will entrust his vision of transcendence to a first fruit company, a remnant, it will be called in some situations, but it's basically a first fruit company. The idea of a forerunner group, that he will give this vision of transcendence, that there is another way, there's something higher, something greater than the world has to offer, that this age has to offer, that the flesh or the pseudo-intellect have to offer, this vision of transcendence. Have you caught the vision? Has this been something that's been awakened in you? Well, this is the fourth phase of the grand plan, the fourth key element. The fifth key element of the grand plan of redemption and restoration is for the Holy One to make a clear contrast between the paths of the righteous and the paths of the wicked, the paths of the wise versus the path of the fool, the way, the narrow road of transcendence versus the ways of folly. And fifth, to make a contrast, well, I guess to make a contrast of fast and destination. Sixth, rather, is to actually take on form, corporeality, and he appeared, to take on flesh, as it were, and teach, demonstrate, and lead men in the way. There must be someone in a human form that does this. That's why Avram is the first asset, but he is by no means the last. And the ultimate asset in this regard of taking on flesh and teaching and demonstrating and leading men in the way, the derech, is Messiah himself. The seventh element of the grand plan is to put the breath of the Holy One into the asset. His life breath, his persona, to have his own personality begin to come out in them, and to lead them whenever even no specific written teaching or instruction or covenant provision applies. And the final conclusion is to send out as harvesters all those in whom is the breath and in whom are carrying this life force, this life persona into the world, to model the Shema lifestyle, how to live in tune with the voice of the Holy One, with the words, with the methods, with the heart, with the countenance, with the demeanor, with the plan, to walk in the Torah pathway, the way, to be at the point of the spear in all situations, to be witnesses on the point of the spear, at the tip of the sword, and to make disciples, to make fellow followers, assets along the way. Well, Torah is essential to the grand plan. Torah cannot be separated from the grand plan of redemption and restoration, because Torah is the instruction manual of the Holy One for human life on planet Earth. How the asset is supposed to live, how the seed of the asset is supposed to live, how we are to walk upon this earth. Torah is designed to train us to walk uprightly and to disarm and neutralize the destructive influences that the world throws at us and come into our lives, into our households, into our bloodlines, into our families, into our communities, and ultimately into every facet of the world. These 7 destructive influences that we'll talk about in just a moment, these are the things that we must learn to navigate around. So there we are. That's the plan. The Torah is an essential part of the plan. Messiah is the ultimate essential part of the plan. The telltale indicators, the 7 destructive influences of the other way, the way of folly, the way of destruction, the way we're supposed to learn to transcend, are, first one we've talked about, Ra. In English is called evil. King James Version a lot of times calls it wickedness or evil. The idea is it is whatever is against the way of God. Shakat, the second one. First one was Ra, the second is Shakat. King James Version translates that as corruption. Corruptive activity that ruins and lays waste. There is that. That is the thing that the world is really good at, corrupting everything it touches. Human intellect in its fallen state, pseudo-intellect as I call it, is so good at corrupting everything it touches. Its words corrupt, its attitudes corrupt, its arrogance corrupts. And then there's Hamas, and that's violence. King James Version calls it violence, at least. It means the cruelty that comes with selfishness, with narcissism, with thinking that that you have a right to things and you should take them. And there's not, if you see something that's not in your mind fair or equitable, you just correct it yourself. You take whatever you want and think it's coming to you. That's Hamas. So the fourth of the destructive influences that come with the fallen man is Nabal. It's folly. It's that which is the opposite of wisdom. It shows that it's not going to be productive. It's not going to be helpful. It's just something that's distracting. It's something that seems good at the time, seems right in your own eyes. The fifth of the 7 destructive influences of fallen man is Tumah. King James Version calls it uncleanness. The idea is it fragments, it eats away. It's like bacteria or something that would, a virus that bites away at the cells and takes away this uncleanness. And then there's the 6th of the destructive influences is holah. It's a word that usually translated in English as profane or common. That which is overused, the usual way things are done. It's got made a rut because this is what everyone's doing. That's what's just deemed normative by fallen humanity. That is the opposite of the kingdom's way. The king's way is to do things that are uplifted and higher than the normal way. So the hola comes out of that comes holim or holi, which is sickness or sicknesses. You see, it's about the idea that we're not performing according to the way in which we're called, the greatness to which we're called to. And the seventh of the seven destructive influences that we're called to disarm and neutralize through Torah and our actions and our following of the Holy One is to'ebah. King James Version of the Bible in English calls it abomination. It is that which is just totally averse to the holiness and the goodness and the energy of God. Well, as we reach Parsha Vayera, we come to an era when human participation in the Holy One's grand plan of redemption and restoration is being dramatically upgraded. Humanity is having more and more influence. As the asset learns the ways of the Holy One and follows into his footsteps and begins to unite with him and become one with him in his mind, soul, body, and flesh and spirit, then the upgrade of the responsibilities and the accountability comes. And so last week we introduced it by saying, with the coming of Avram into the picture, welcome to His Majesty's Special Forces and to the higher protocols and priorities of the grace-instituted or initiated and grace-motivated covenant lifestyle approach. We don't just live a covenant lifestyle. We live one that is instigated, that is motivated, that is driven, compelled, impelled by grace. Without grace, the covenant lifestyle becomes an empty, lawless legality. Without covenant lifestyle, however, grace becomes license. Grace becomes meaningless and empty. So here we are, the covenant lifestyle that is initiated and motivated by grace. That is what His Majesty's Special Forces are called to live. I call it the Shulamite's Odyssey. That's what we're all called to live, to walk out. The Shulamite's Odyssey, coming from Song of Solomon. The Shulamite was the beloved, the beautiful maiden. The Shulamite's Odyssey. Also, we could call it the divine romance. It's a great dance between the creator of the universe and those who he has invited to the dance, and those who have responded to his invitation. Now, it's a great dance, this great Shulamite's Odyssey, this divine romance of walking with the Holy One, walking with our Creator, and learning to walk with Him and being fascinated by Him, but also being responsive to Him and accountable to Him and being used by Him, walking and co-laboring with Him in all things. It has two main secrets to the dance, two main secrets of the Odyssey. With regard to a dance, it's knowing the choreography. We have to know the basic choreography of the dance. What is the rate, the meter? What is which direction are we going to go? And what are the main steps? Knowing the choreography. That's what Torah is so valuable about. So the testimonies of the patriarchs are so valuable. This is the choreography we live in. We just have to understand how we're now walking in the same choreography, though our situations look a little different because of time and place and situation. Knowing the choreography is the first main secret of the dance. The second is learning to trust our partner. You know, if you don't trust your partner, you won't take the major steps. You'll be very cautious. And you'll never accomplish very much in the dance. So knowing the choreography is main secret one, and trusting your partner is the second. Parsha Lech Lecha last week introduced the classic patterns under which the Holy One walks or dances with man, his asset. And what the Holy One did and is doing and will do with Avraham is what he longs to do with each one of us. This is the plan. Now, the precise steps and how they work their way out on the floor of life, the precise steps of the walk or the dance, are uniquely choreographed by our suitor, the leading man for each of us. But the patterns the steps, the goals, the plan, the way always remains the same. For these are eternal. We are part of it. So it's time to go to the deeper levels of covenant relationship motivated by grace. I call this beyond good and faithful servant to hello friend of God. Now the friendship factor, in Hebrew the word would be chaver. It means companion, but companion in the sense of delighting in one another's company, regularly engaging in both casual and serious conversation, being responsive, being in communication. Second thing, beyond companionship, it is co-laboring. The idea here is that we share a common vision with the Holy One. We share his values. We begin to share his priorities, his purposes. We begin to understand our mission is his mission. His mission is our mission. And we cooperate with him, therefore, as opposed to fighting him or trying to do things our own way. We cooperate with him in mission-oriented activities. That's friendship. Friendship is companionship and this kind of co-laboring. And then it's being his confidant and him making him our confidant. Letting him, he knows our strengths and weaknesses and letting him deal with those things. And he knows that we can be much greater than we are. And we trust him to make us more than we appear on the surface, more than we've ever known we could be. And to hold on to us and stay with him and talk to him and keep the lines of communication and accountability open through good times and bad. And let him protect us and defend us and everything that's valuable to us. We're getting closer to the theme of Parsha Vayera, aren't we? Well, I want to move into that process then. When worlds collide, what happens when we, the Shulamite Odyssey people, the divine romance people, I call them sometimes the counterculture people, where it counts the culture of this world, not because we hate it, not because we hate the people, because we are called to a higher way, to model a higher, more excellent way. So what happens when we, the counterculture people that he has called forth, respond to the call, and in the response to the call we face, I'll call them crossroads of divergence or critical flashpoints, when we are going different directions, radically different directions with different purposes than the rest of the world is. This is what's going to happen to us. This is what's going to happen to Avram. This is the pattern that's laid before us. This is what the call is all about, that there will be these critical flashpoints, these crossroads of divergence. And in those places, we will come face to face with the perverse priorities, the crippled worldviews, the thought control methodologies, the temptations, the seductions, the ways, and the learned destructive behaviors of what I call the city and tower people. Want to build a city and want to build a tower, want to do anything besides what the Holy One has said to do. Want to do something that's going to glorify, make them a name, make them popular, make them feel thrills, make them feel accomplishments, make them feel superior to other people in some way. The city tower people. They're going to surround us at times, and they will be threats to us and to others. So as we get ready to get into the specifics of Parsha Vayera, with those general outline factors being laid out to you, let's begin by our call to worship. Join with me if you know it, or you can read along. Baruchu et Adonai Hamvorak. Baruch Adonai Hamvorak Leolam Vayet. Baruch Ata Adonai Eloheinu Melech HaOlam Asher Bachar Banu Mikol Ha'amin V'natan Lanu Et Toratu. Baruch Ata Adonai Noten HaTorah. And now with our call to worship being stated, open our eyes, O Holy One, that we may see wondrous things in your Torah, for we are but strangers in the earth. So do not hide your commandments from us. Well, last week at the end of Parsha Lech Lecha, here's where we left off. It was the great day of covenant seal imprintation, the circumcision, the sign, the oath, the evidence in the flesh of everyone in the covenant house, all the assets of the male population at least, that there was a covenant that went so deep into every facet of our being. And we read at the end of Genesis 17 that Abraham was 99 years old when he was circumcised in the flesh of his foreskin. And his son Ishmael was 13 years old. Yitzhak had not been born yet. Ishmael, his son, was 13 years old when he was circumcised in the flesh of his foreskin. So Avram's 99, Ishmael's 13. And then that same very day, it says, Avram was circumcised and his son Ishmael and all the men of his house, whether born in the house or bought with money from a foreigner, redeemed, as it were circumcised with him. So we have this mark, we have this surgery, we have this thing being spelled out that we now are unmistakably the servants, the assets of the Holy One and the covenant lifestyle, the dance. And so we begin our reading in chapter 18, verse 1. Again, I will read, as I usually do, a little bit in Hebrew, and then I'll come behind it and give you an English translation that I have myself devised here, based on what my understanding of the Hebrew. So here we go. We'll start with the Hebrew. And the Hebrew is not designed to make you sit there, oh, I wish I knew that language, although I presume it may do that. But it's designed to speak directly into your spirit and awaken the neshama in you, the breath of life that God placed in Adam and every soul since Adam, but has usually being stuffed down and crammed under a bunch of other things by the world, to awaken that. And the Hebrew is the language the Holy One chose to speak to mankind in. It has a spiritual power to it. So we'll speak that, but we'll use the English to help you catch up with your mind and your intellect. Chapter 18, verse 1 begins. Vayera elav Adonai be'elonei Mamre. And the Holy One appeared, manifested, made himself visible and seemingly corporeal in human sight at the oaks, at the trees of Mamre. And of course, Mamre is by Hebron, and that's where Avram is living at the time. The next phrase, V'hu yoshev petach ha'ohel kekom hayom. And he, being Avram, sat in the tent door, the entrance to his tent, in the hottest part of the day. Vayisa enav vayar, and he lifted his eyes. V'hineh shelosha anoshim, and he saw 3 strangers standing. Nitzavim elav, standing a short distance from where he was. Again, in Hebrew, Vayar v'yarotz likratam mipatach ha'ohel. And when he saw them from the entrance to his tent, v'yishtachu arza, and he bowed himself to the ground after having run to meet them. Vayomar Adonai imnu masati chen b'aneik. And he said, Sirs, Lords, if I've found any grace in your sight, al na ta'avor me'al avdeka, do not pass your servant by, he cried. Yukach na me'at ma'im necharatsu reglakem, and let some water be brought and wash your feet. V'hishuanu tukat ha'etz, and rest under this tree. V'ekha vat lechem, and take a morsel, a portion, a sop of bread. V'sa'uda, v'sa'adu libechem, and strengthen your heart. Achar avorak, and then you may continue on your way. Well, this is the initial encounter that Parsha Vayera begins. The Holy One is visiting his friend Avram. These lines of communication are open, and now we're going to go to a deeper level. Before it's over, we will see this level. We will see when lives are threatened, when the deepest fears of mankind are realized, both in Avram, in the people of Sodom, in Lot, in Lot's wife, in Lot's sons-in-law, in Lot's daughters, in Avimelech of Gerar, in Hagar, the Egyptian maid, in her son Yishmael, through Avram, and then again at the very end in both Abraham and Yitzhak. We're going to see these life-threatening crucibles come about. So after the visit of the standing ones, we find out that all of the paradigms of possibility that Sarah thought might be existing are going to be broken and shattered. She is going to be told that she herself, her physical body, though it is aged and though it is past the time for doing so, will be given a child, will bear a child, and will nurse that child. That's going to lead into a conversation between Avram and the Holy One about what's going to happen down the road in Sodom, Gomorrah, and the cities of the plain. Avram is going to see that life on earth is fragile, and that the places that we are familiar with, the things that we are used to, the ways in which we normally see things done on earth can pass away in a moment. And he gets this sensation that Sodom is on the tip of the spear. Sodom and Gomorrah, and his brother, his nephew Lot, and his family there that he loves is there on the tip of the spear. When that happens, how will Abraham respond? And in the course of doing, what will the Holy One say to Avram? The Holy One will actually speak some words of purpose and definition that will further along this idea of what the asset is here on earth to do. He said, "Shall I hide from Avram what I am about to do? Because I have made myself known to him and made him know me in order that for a reason," there is a reason, "that he may teach, instruct, command," in some places it says, "to his children and his household following him, to walk in the way of the Holy One." Here we go. So we see the grand plan. We see it beginning to flesh out. And now we're going to get specifics. That he may keep, shamar, treasure, cherish, justice and righteousness, it says in the King James Version of English. But in Hebrew, it's zakah, which can be everything from charity to uprightness, but it really means that which is productive for the kingdom of heaven and the plan of God. And then the other is mishpat, which is usually translated as judgment in the King James Version or other places, but means that which brings about good in the earth, which heals, which restores, which brings about the plan of redemption and restoration. So these are the ways in which the Holy One is going to expand Avram's understanding. And so he begins to then have this conversation about him. He's heard an outcry about Sodom, and he has come down to hear about it. And Avram immediately realizes this puts the people of Sodom and his nephew Lot at risk of existential threat. And not because the Holy One told him that, because he just realized it, and now mortality was before him. And he begins to talk to the Holy One about mortality. And he begins to do what is often called intercession. But it is more than that. It is not even really that at all. What it really is keeping these lines of communication open and letting everything that is not the thoughts and the ways of the Holy One escape Avram, because he's going to need to be fully in tune with the Holy One. It comes down to this idea of saying, if there are 10, there it starts with 50, 45, goes on different numbers down the road to 10. If there are 10 Zedekim, if there are 10 who are actually doing the things that are of the kingdom, righteousness, it says in English. If there's 10 of these in the city, you will not destroy the city, will you? The righteous with the wicked, will you? And the Holy One says, no, no. And that's exactly right. He will not. But there are not 10. There's not really even one who's fully walking in those ways. Lot is more righteous than the rest of them. And his righteousness, though, is spelled out for us later in Scripture. He was tormented in his most righteous soul over the wicked deeds of those in Sodom. Is that the testimony that we're tormented in our? No, I mean we obviously feel the weight and the pain of the cause of sin, but we are supposed to be vessels of joy and of hope, not of torment and bitterness and anguish of soul. Well, that's the problem we had, and the rest of the people there. Lot's wife when her life was threatened, when what was important and valuable to her was threatened, she just couldn't face moving on without it. And we saw what happened to her with the daughters and sons-in-law. They all were put in the situation of facing an existential threat. Some people laugh and mock and make fun, and some people go into all sorts of hysteria and behave irrationally like Lot's daughters did. But you see that how human beings respond to the most critical crucibles of life, whenever the life hangs in the balance, the life of the ones you love most or the things you love most hangs in the balance. That's where the true test is, whether someone is an asset of the Holy One or is really just a pretender who unfortunately is really an asset of the world system. After the aftermath of the fire and brimstone that hit Sodom and Gomorrah, we see that there is that the Lot and his daughters collapse under the scenario. They run and hide in a cave, and then horrible things happen. They freak out. And then we see that Avram and Sarah have to leave. The fallout from the fire and brimstone was so great. The great cloud that arose over the valley was spreading into the realm, and there was nothing but live. And so there was no grass for the livestock, no grass, no fields for the cattle, no food would grow for Avram and his family. So he had to move westward, and he went to Gerar, the land of the Philistines. Then we have the whole experience of Avram in the land of the Philistines, and that begins to be a scenario where Avram learns that his life is in danger again. He actually knows that Sarah's life will be in danger. He makes hard choices to say that she is his sister, to save his own life, but that puts her at risk. When you have these crises, existential crises, what do you do? And in the process that he assumes, he has an idea in his head that there is no fear of the Holy One in Gerar. And he learns that while it might not be the level of fear of the Holy One that he has developed, there is a fear of the Holy One there. He overlooked it. He wouldn't let his vision be big enough to see the higher levels. The lower levels, I should say, of fear of the Holy One, which was what was in of Abimelech, the king there, and others within his community. So it is with us. We, as part of our walk and our dance of love, of our Shulamite odyssey, our covenant walk with the Holy One, we have to learn to be able to see the possibility, the potential for fear of the Holy One, even when we're not seeing it manifested in behavior. The Holy One has put his spirit, his life force, his spark of life in every human being. Our job is to find it and speak to it and not be so distracted by the behavior on the outside that we can't see it, as in this case Abraham did. He learned the lesson that there is a fear of the Holy One everywhere because the Holy One has made it that way. It may need to be awakened, but it does not need to be assumed it doesn't exist. And so we have that go on, then we have the actual birth and naming in the early days, all the way up to the Feast of Weaning of Yitzhak. And we're so excited. We laugh with Sarah. We laugh. We joyfully rejoice because this promised child has come. And the hope of the asset and the generations to come, our seed, the seed through which we will come, is now alive and present in Yitzhak. And though Avram may be mortal, though he may die, the covenant, the odyssey, the journey, the mission, the dance will continue through Yitzhak. But it's not going to be easy. We find out that Ishmael is not happy with this new person in the camp, and he begins to do more than it says he mocks in the King James Version of English, but he does more than that. He's threatening the very life. He is becoming a hazard to the child, and so Sarah wants him to go, and wants Hagar, the bondwoman, to depart as well. And she talks to Avram, and the Holy One visits Avram and says, yes, listen to Sarah. And the departure of Hagar and Ishmael, they go out into the area around Beersheba. There's an angelic visitation. We see Hagar, again, face to face with the death of what he cares most about. She fears that the death will take place of Ishmael. And therefore, we see what her response and her reaction is. She just separates herself. She isolates herself. She just puts him in one place and just moves away so she doesn't have to look at it. Well, that's one of the withdrawal syndromes of man whenever they are faced with an existential threat having to do with someone, something they love most. And then we see, of course, a miracle is wrought because the Holy One is faithful to his covenant. And he cares about people. He cared about Ishmael. He even promised great things over Ishmael and his bloodline, even though they don't seem consistent. And they can't be worked at the same time together in unity at this stage in time, at least, with those of Yitzhak. We see then that Abimelech begins to realize, after he has been prayed for by Avram, who deceived him, who went through this existential crisis of fear of the death of his loved one and himself, and yet the Holy One says, he's a prophet, he will pray for you. And so Abimelech has Avram pray for him. And Avram, though he was embarrassed, I'm sure, humiliated by his own being called on the carpet for his own failures of faith, here he is, he's praying for Abimelech, and Abimelech and his household are healed. Abimelech had to face this. So Abimelech comes and cuts covenant with Abraham, a covenant of mutual non-aggression, a covenant of peace. And they do that at Beersheba. And then we have, in chapter 22, the conclusion of the main focus of this parsha is the Akedah, the so-called binding or tying down of Yitzhak, the call to go up to Mount Moriah as it's called in some of the Western commentaries, the call to go to Moriah and to there present Yitzhak, to approach with Yitzhak. This is called Avram, to give up that which is most precious to him, to surrender, to realize he has no ability, no power to keep Yitzhak safe, or even to assure he will continue to live. To give that up completely, for surrender, power, control over to the Holy One. And he does that. And, of course, the miracle takes place. So we know that there's so much there in chapter 22, verses 1 through 19. The Akedah is the cardinal element of the highest level of testing of us. And it's not that he wanted human sacrifice or commanded human sacrifice. That was Avram's interpretation of it. And that was what he was willing to do. But that is not what the Holy One wanted, and we see why, see how. We see these wonderful things on the mountain. The language itself is so beautiful. It says that on the mountain of the Holy One, he will be seen. He will, and I think it often says he will provide. But the provision is through visibility. And then the idea of Ra'ah, which is Vayera, is the name of the Parsha. This is a theme, a word that goes throughout the Parsha. Ra'ah. And so on the mountain of the Holy One, he will be seen. And what happened was, of course, whenever Abraham was preparing to actually go as far as he could, or as far as he thought he had to go, he had already told the men, the young men, to stay here while we go yonder and worship. And that's a special, he introduces worship to the whole concept of the covenant right back here. And covenant worship meaning shakat, meaning to bow down oneself, to surrender oneself. Stay here while we do that, and then we will return to you, I and the lad. And he fully represented to him his true faith that he was not going to kill this son, but he was going to come back alive. And that had happened. And so what really happened whenever he was preparing him, bound him to the altar and prepared the knife and the fire and all these things, the Holy One speaks, or the angel of the Holy One speaks to Avram. And he says, Avram, Avram. And that doesn't just mean the name, calling your name. Avram is a name that was given to him by the Holy One. In the first place, that means exalted. Father, a father of many, father of multitudes. Well, he's calling him by name and calling him by his purpose and destiny. If he's going to be a father of multitudes, he's not going to kill this son, this boy. And so he calls him and he says, now don't lay a hand on man. I now know that you trust me in the deepest crucible of life, and you hold nothing higher in esteem than you hold me. And he goes on to affirm his destiny and his calling. You will be a father to nation, but you will be a blessing to every nation on the face of the earth. Well, this is the part of the process we see, and the way in which the Holy One provided or caused himself to be seen was Abraham was at the top of the mountain, it says, which there's nothing above him besides the heavens. And it says he looked up. So if he was looking up from the top of the mountain, he couldn't see anything besides what was in the heavens. And he looks into the heavens and he looks up and he sees a lamb. a ram caught in the thicket. Well, this thicket was a heavenly provision by the Holy One, and it is this great strong one of the Holy One being provided to him. And he took the lamb on the earth in his human in form, and he put him on the altar, and he did what to the ram, what he was going to do in his mind to his son Yitzhak. And Yitzhak and he rejoiced and celebrated. And then we finally conclude the Parsha with the introduction to the next matriarch, to Rivka. We see a few verses where, out of nowhere, Abraham receives word that his brother Nahor has sired through Milcah a series of folks, and it goes all the way down to Rivka, Rebecca as she's known in the Western world. And this, of course, lays the seeds for next week and the time of Abraham's personal mortality, when he knows he's going to die. And Sarah's already dead, and he's going to go and he's going to call forth a bride to continue the seed, to continue the asset, to continue the Shulamite's odyssey, to continue the divine romance in another generation, through not just Yitzhak, but also through Rivka and the children, the seed of Rivka, forever and ever. Well, beloved, I pray you'll have a wonderful Shabbat, that you will enjoy your readings from Parsha Vayera, that you will be touched in your spirit, and that you will be caught up in the great swell of the divine romance of the Shulamite odyssey, of this covenant lifestyle birthed out of the grace of the Holy One. Shabbat Shalom.